Initially, I was excited by the concept of Afterfall Reconquest, an action shooter set in a stalker or a Metro-esque post-apocalyptic world. After spending what little time is available to players at the moment, about 45 minutes worth of game time to finish, I probably won't go back to Afterfall again in a more complete state. Unless the developers do a complete teardown and start over, I don't think it's going to be a game for me. Now, before anybody thinks I'm being overly harsh on Afterfall, that's generally not my style. I'm fully aware this is an early access title and that at full price, Episode 1 is about $7, so I'm not expecting AAA studio levels of polish here. But to that end, $7 buys more video games now than it has ever done before. Before I go into what I feel Afterfall is doing wrong, I will gladly point out a few things the game does right. To start, the art direction, particularly in the introduction sequence, is really great, almost to the point where I think it sold me on a game that I feel Afterfall can never be. The starkly contrasted pen and ink animation was done very well, and the voiceover set the exposition perfectly, speaking of how humanity continually tears itself down, rebuilds only to start the self-destructive cycle all over again. But now the cycle has apparently been broken. By what? Gamers will have to find out in a more complete version of the game. Environmentally, Afterfall seems to stand on some sturdy feet as well, especially for a budget-priced game. The world is mysterious but familiar, and seems to really nail down the worn-out future vibe that a lot of games aim for but miss entirely. Another thing Afterfall has going for it is a legitimate challenge. There's no regenerating health. If you get injured, you need to siphon the life force out of one of your fallen enemies, which takes time and leaves you vulnerable. Ammunition is also scarce, so players can't just throw lead around and hope that it solves all their problems. Right now, the enemy AI is absolutely atrocious, and the lighting could use some work as well. I don't want to focus on these negatives for too long, especially since the developers have noted that these are points they're planning on improving. But it is very bad. At the moment, the AI is simply on a one-track course directly at the player, and its pathfinding is troubled at best. Or perhaps the issue lies in another problem. Enemies and players will get snagged by invisible obstacles. Players can glitch climb almost anything by spamming the crouch button, but the enemies aren't so lucky. Annoyingly, the game falls back on some cheap tactics that most developers have abandoned. For instance, enemies will spawn in areas that you've just cleared. Doing it once or twice for shock value feels okay in some cases, but here it happens pretty regularly. It's this type of mentality that has me worried for the full build. The game also feels sluggish from both the player and the enemies. There was no real sense of urgency when I played the game. But perhaps the worst thing that I can say about Reconquest is that it plays it entirely too safe to the point of it being boring. Guns have no weight to them. Shot enemies show no signs of being injured until they die and go full ragdoll. Aside from the well-designed environments, there's nothing that makes Reconquest stand out in the current shooter market. At times, it reminds me of Lost Planet, but Lost Planet at least has a hitch, with its walkers, giant enemies, and grappling hooks. So far, Afterfall is just bland. And since it's in early access, it's both bland and buggy. So I would advise most people to hold off until a much more completed version of the game is finished.